Let's talk about the fearful avoidant and sex. Leslie Wells, connection coach. I help individuals heal, thrive, improve, repair, and connect more deeply in their romantic relationships by looking at things through an attachment lens. And each of the different insecure attachment styles show up differently when it comes to intimacy. So one of the things about the fearful avoidant is they like to connect deeply. They desire real intimacy and real connection, even though they're afraid of it, and a lot of times there will be a push-pull that's involved with that, but they really crave that deep intimacy and they are bored with the superficial. So one of the things with a fearful avoidant is if they start with a sexual relationship from a casual standpoint, that usually does not typically work out well from what I've seen. I'm not here to judge anybody. People have different beliefs than I have, and that's fine, but I will say that most of them, if they start out with a casual relationship, at worst case scenario, then a lot of times they end up feeling used. And that's because they desire to be deeply seen, known, and understood. And so if a relationship is more casual, those things are not happening. They really want to connect not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally. They want to really be able to exchange ideas, have different viewpoints, get to know who you are at a deep level, understand how you work, your desires, your dreams, and they want you to be curious about those things for them as well and get to know them on a very, very deep level. And so usually if things start off casually, and they can start off casually with a fearful avoidant, because a fearful avoidant is not triggered. Their betrayal wounds and some of their abandonment wounds are not triggered until after sort of the honeymoon stage of a relationship or the romantic stage of a relationship. It's not until you get more into that power struggle. So in the beginning stages, fearful avoidants can attach very quickly and move very fast. And so they may start off with physical attachment or being more attracted to a casual relationship. That usually does not stick. At best, they usually get bored with that after a matter of time. A worst case scenario, they start to feel used, like you were using them for access to their body without actually getting to know them and understand them, and that can make them show up in not so great ways. What I see more often is that fearful avoidants choose to or prefer to have a deep bond before they actually get physical or get intimate. And this makes sense. So the bonding hormone and neurotransmitters actually play a role here. Okay. So the bonding hormone that we have is what's called oxytocin. So if you are with someone for an extended period of time and you connect with them, you will have oxytocin that sort of starts to happen at a baseline level. So if you've been married for a long time, you're going to have a baseline of oxytocin from your partner, right? And so the more often that you're with your partner, the more that this neurotransmitter is released and you sort of you begin to bond with that. So it goes beyond the physical. So dopamine is different. Dopamine just hits our pleasure reward center of our brain. And so it's different. So for a fearful avoidant who craves bonding and really responds to that neurotransmitter because they are wanting intimacy, they're going to prefer being in a longer term relationship when it comes to a sexual relationship. So if they get the dopamine hits in the beginning from that reward center, that usually doesn't do enough for them like it will for an avoidant who oftentimes is suppressing and feels nothing. And so they actually are seeking those dopamine hits. This also plays into the big problem that we have with avoidance, because they get those dopamine hits without ever being triggered by anything that has to do with actual bonding and intimacy. So oxytocin is something that grows over time. So if it is a casual relationship and there's no investment and there's no intimacy, that is something from a neurotransmitter perspective that just isn't going to cut it for a fearful avoidant. So the other thing to remember about a fearful avoidant is they do have that betrayal wound. And so they really have a hard time being vulnerable and trusting. And so it takes a lot of vulnerability and a lot of trust to give someone access to your body. So a lot of fearful avoidants, because of that trust wound, that betrayal wound, a lot of times they do take longer to get into a sexual relationship with someone and to feel safe in that space. And again, they really deeply desire to be seen, heard, and understood. So in those relationships, it's also really important that you are very aware of their boundaries, what pleases them, what displeases them, what makes them feel valued and cherished, and what makes them not feel so much that way, because they want to be deeply seen and understood and known, and they want to be deeply known sexually too. You cannot deeply know someone sexually in a casual relationship, or if you have a bunch of partners all at one time. To be able to deeply know someone, you need to spend time with that person in intimate situations and give them a lot of your time and attention. The other thing that tends to happen in a casual relationship with a fearful avoidant is they do start to get triggered as they develop feelings. So they typically do develop feelings whenever there is a physical connection, okay? Because they desire more than a physical connection and they deeply need that. That's part of their core needs. So as they become more connected physically, there starts to be fears around getting hurt, because once a fearful avoidant is invested, that's when that push-pull starts, where they deeply desire intimacy and connection. So it may be that things started off casual and now they are starting to have feelings as a result of the physical. Really common for a fearful avoidant, so they're beginning to be emotionally connected. And then once they're emotionally connected and invested, that's when the fear kicks in that, hey, I'm invested now this person has the potential to hurt me, betray me, abandon me, make me feel bad, break my trust, pull away from me. And so that's when that push-pull can start, and they can start getting that conflicting feelings internally. And so at that point in time, they may start to show up differently and actually pull back and withdraw a little bit in the relationship and slip into their more avoidant side if they are someone who typically leans more anxious. But then as they pull away, if that oxytocin starts to decrease, then that can kick in where they actually go back to seeking that bonding that comes with that oxytocin. So again, we see how the push-pull kind of happens with the neurotransmitters as well. The other thing for a fearful avoidant is they deeply want to be chosen, okay? They have often been overlooked. They have been deprioritized. They have that, all of that comes with like people not being able to show up well for them, for people betraying them. And so they really want to be pursued and chosen. And if you're only pursuing them and choosing them in a physical relationship, a lot of times that will start to build resentment for them, because they don't feel like you're actually choosing them for them, that you're more or less just using them because they're available and there's access to them in a physical way. They can also shut down and deactivate if there is not reciprocal activities going back and forth. So if they are always the initiator or they are always the pursuer and you're not reciprocating and there's not reciprocity, then a lot of times that can cause them to put up a wall and shut down, because they do not do well with any feelings of rejection or perceived rejection. Vasopressin is another neurotransmitter that can come into play for a fearful avoidant, particularly more so with the men than it does for the females. So men typically have more vasopressin than women, but if they hit their avoidant side and pull away, then vasopressin can also be a neurotransmitter that causes them to lean back in when they feel that disconnect or they feel that distance. It can prompt that desire for closeness again. Now, a lot of fearful avoidants also really have physical touch as their love language. So it can create intimacy for them. It can create safety for them, especially if they tend to lean more anxious. So there are fearful avoidants who, even if they are frustrated or angry or not feeling connection somewhere else, will be able to connect on a physical level. Where even if they're like mid-fight, they will be able to connect sexually or physically just to be able to connect in any way, shape, or form. Also, those that do start off connecting in a physical way first, usually that will move them faster to emotional connection, because again, that superficial level of connection is just not enough for them. It's also really, really important that you have transparency around your physical relationship with a fearful avoidant. They already have trust issues. They already have betrayal issues. And so you need to be very honest about the nature of your relationship, and you need to be very open and honest and transparent and be able to have conversations about your intimate life. And because fearful avoidants are hypervigilant, they will track your behaviors around intimacy. They will start asking themselves questions and be very observant if they are the pursuer more, if you're not paying attention to things, if your sex life has sort of withered away, if you are acting different, if your intimacy is changing. They are more likely, especially if they are anxiously attached, to want more one-on-one contact, more eye contact, more attention in that way, because they want to connect emotionally too. But they will be very hypervigilant. Are you happy? Are you satisfied? Are you okay? They will definitely be asking all of the questions and pay attention to everything. But they are also deeply vulnerable and engaged really well in chemistry and intimacy, and can show up really well in a physical relationship. Ideally, for an FA or a fearful avoidant, they really look at intimacy as a way to foster bonding, closeness, connection, intimacy, and to build safety and trust. So you need to know that going into a relationship with a fearful avoidant, especially if you have any ideas that this is going to be a casual relationship. It's probably not going to work out well for them, and there will be some resentment that builds up if you're not able to eventually give them more. Of course, there are always exceptions, but this is what I see most with fearful avoidance when it comes to sex.